Dean observed the many people in Tokyo streets with care from the shadow the three companions stood in. "Do you think it wise to leave Azazel running around like that?" he addressed the devil. "I can't let him run around free. People will think you abducted him with those chains, and we have the mark." Merryleis looked at the watcher, who betrayed no emotion regarding their conversation. "I guess you're right," he sighed and struck off the shackles. "How cooperative you are with your friends, Lucifer," Azazel said with what sounded like genuine respect, rubbing the skin where it had been in contact with the metal. Deep wounds from the hot iron of Duardale's cells defined his wrists, although there were marks all over from where the chain had been wrapped around the body. The burns at ankles and wrists were the worst. The Englishman had regarded the measure in the prison with disapproval. He still did. Watcher or not, some punishments were just too cruel in his opinion. Dean felt uncomfortable in the streets of Japan's capital city. Even if many Westerners were crossing their path, the eyes of the occasional traditionally clad man followed the trio. To Dean, those eyes already threatened to slit their throats. "Do you know where to find your friend, Merryleis?" "I have a vague idea. It mostly works out. You seem to have lost your adventurous urge. I only noticed just now how hostile the Japanese are towards us. They are samurai, still loyal to their cultural heritage. They seem rather unfriendly," Dean answered as another shiver, born from a lethal stare, ran down his spine. Merryleis had led them into an alley with less people, but it didn't help much, because now the man had the feeling they were followed. Samurai are keeping the order, or kept the order. Right now they see their world being turned upside down by the Western forces. They see their culture fading away to be replaced by Western values. They don't take kindly to any foreigners, especially not those trying to sneak themselves into their culture. Merryleis motioned towards Azazel's clothing at the last sentence. "The carrying of swords is forbidden, and punishment and mistreatment, also without reason, is severe from the imperial forces towards the old ways." His friend resumed his explanation. "There are rebellions and uprisings all over Japan. You can't just take away the people's culture and expect them to say nothing. It's who they are, after all." Dean stopped dead when suddenly a man in kimono and hakama blocked the way ahead, the hand already on the hilt of his sword. Behind them another man mimicked the gesture. Two more appeared next to Azazel, causing the other people to abandon their tasks and scramble for shelter. Dean wanted to interfere, but Merryleis held him back. "You don't interfere with the business of a samurai." "But Tomaru!" One of the samurai spoke briskly. The manner of pronunciation made the command sound all the more intimidating. "Teme wa samurai no fuku o kimasu. Dare da to omoimasu ka?" the other said and spit in front of Azazel's feet. Tension was graspable in the air around the man. Dean knew the feeling from the Irish, who grew furious each time the English harassed them, mostly because they wanted to have some fun with their power. "What are they saying?" he whispered to his friend. "They accuse him of wearing samurai clothes. They are very upset about it." "Samurai o imasen," Azazel answered in his usual calm voice. "Yokosha dake desu." All efforts were in vain. Whatever the watcher said, it wasn't working on the insulted samurai. "Koroshitaku arimasen, samurai-san." The last sentence broke the calm before the storm, when all four men drew their swords to attack. Never had Dean seen such graceful movements. In one motion, not driven by haste nor reluctance, Azazel dodged the one blade from in front of him. Then, gripping that very man's hands, he used that one sword to parry the second blow from behind. A kick against the second man's leg followed, bringing him out of balance. Taking the first man's sword, Azazel sent him after the second, causing both men to fall. By that time, the two men blocking the way had caught up with the watcher, but he didn't take long to defeat those two either. One blow, well placed, positioned the sword's tip at the man's throat before the enemy's blade could cut Azazel. Seeing the foreigner stop amidst the movement, the other men ceased their attempts to attack. Kuroshitaku, arimasen, the watcher said once again with more emphasis. Watashi ni makete mo hachide wa arimasen. Azazel maintained his calm tone, keeping his voice free of any arrogance. It made Dean wonder. The watchers were supposed to be heartless, cold, and most of all, they looked down on humanity. The samurai, seeing the mercy of a strong spirit, bowed with an apology and left them alone. Azazel's skills must have convinced them of him being worthy. Still holding the sword, the watcher turned to them. I am wearing their clothing. He showed a faint smile. Or so they think. Thanks for saving us, mate. Now give me that sword. The fallen angel held out his hand for Azazel to follow his command. Merelias! Dean wanted to point out how the watcher had just refrained from harming people, but Merelias didn't want to hear it. No, Dean, this is not something to solve with human compassion. He's dangerous, and I don't trust him to not use his powers to spread destruction. Just like the last time, Azazel gave in, handing over the weapon without protest. Being cooperative does not mean honest, Merelias said as if he had read Dean's thoughts. They followed a few more streets through Tokyo. Dean saw restaurants and geishas and many hard-working men carrying their goods from one point to another. He also saw imperial soldiers clad in blue and full of arrogant ignorance. People laughed and bought and worked, and many seemed to be content with their life, working as if it was the fulfillment of their whole existence that lay in the performing of tasks with utter perfection. And yet there was the underlying turmoil of new influences, politics, and change. It was one of humanity's greatest flaws that when two cultures met, the people could not accept each other without trying to change one another. Because everyone thought the other to be inferior with his strange rites and clothes and beliefs. There was a harmony in the old that had gotten lost in the new. Dean wasn't sure if it was right or good to replace a kimono with a suit. Farther away from the city's center, Merelias left them alone for a moment to assure himself of having found the right place. Do you always yield to others, irrelevant if you are guilty or not? Dean asked after the raven had shot into the air. I see no reason in fighting if it leads to nothing. I can defend myself with or without weapons. If Lucifer feels safer with me being leashed like a dog, I won't deny him that. I've never seen him treat anyone like that. He shouldn't take away your dignity. You have to understand him. The Watchers followed his example. Perhaps he feels responsible. And I remind him of that in addition to me being branded as wickedness incarnate. He looked at Dean. His eyes showed a hint of remorseful sorrow. It was the first time Dean saw any emotional reactions from Azazel. You should be wary of me, Dean. I'm corrupted by the dark after all. Merelias returned quickly, probably out of fear that Azazel might try to escape, concluding that they had headed towards the wrong place, but that he had found the right one just a bit farther in the countryside. The estate, for it wasn't much less magnificent than a palace, was surrounded by a large garden. An islet in a pond was connected to the shore by a bridge. Dozens of cherry trees grew there and stood in full bloom. Water lilies and koi fish graced the pond, and the air was filled with the song of birds. Dean got the impression that they had passed some unseen threshold into a realm free of human struggles. Somewhere the rhythmic thud of a bamboo tube sounded as it emptied its watery contents, only to be refilled by the fountain. The occultist saw how Azazel stood in front of a cherry tree. When Dean stepped closer, he started talking. You can search in eternity for perfection, and yet you will never find it with the wrong mindset. What do you mean? The man asked, puzzled by the mysterious statement. It's like love, Dean. It's there, right in front of you. But you can only see it if you accept its flaws. Azazel, they were interrupted when two guards approached. Dean didn't, once again, understand a word they said, and he was starting to make a mental note to learn a few more languages in the future. Meroliah spoke to them with bows and polite gestures. The suspicious faces of the Japanese men lit up once they understood their purpose and motioned them to follow. They were led through the rest of the garden and into the large building with the curved roof. They waited in a large room with a polished wooden floor and without their shoes, except Azazel, who didn't have shoes and was asked by the servants to wash his feet. "Lucifer!" The shocked voice of a broad-shouldered man sounded from behind as they admired the Buddhistic altar to the side of the room. Upon turning round, Dean saw a Japanese, slightly smaller than himself and clothed in many layers of kimono garments. He looked somewhat fearful at Meroliah. He quickly hid it, however, speaking with authority. "What do you want?" "Izanagi!" Meroliah took a moment to sniff the air like a dog. "And I smell Izanami's cooking. Smells promising." Izanagi stared at the devil with an expression of utter confusion, if not even dismay. "How about we share a meal? I suggest a parley." "Why? For what?" "I know we didn't part with good wishes for each other. I, for one, didn't, but I need your help." Meroliah explained somewhat reluctantly, while the tips of the fingers on his right and left hand met. Izanagi pondered for a moment, mustering each of the three strangers in his domain with the dark eyes. "And if I help you, you will leave me alone. You will never seek revenge." "If that's all you want, I will gladly fulfill your wish." "We have a pact, then," Izanagi concluded, shaking the devil's hand and ascending the flight of stairs. Come, we can introduce ourselves upon sitting down." Still surprised about how easy the demon was convinced, Dean followed. He had somehow expected more resistance, more dislike, but not that. They found a room large enough for all of them on the third floor. A woman in a kimono, her black hair bound, was already sitting. Her face showed astonishment and confusion upon seeing the guests, but she refrained from voicing it. "My dear," Izanagi started when he had sat down on the pillow on the ground, "I hope you don't mind a few guests." "I never do. Eternity is boring without surprises. Although," she cast a glance towards Meroliah, "you don't intend to drag us back to hell, do you, Lucifer?" There was a hint of sassiness in her voice, which was emphasized by her fox-like smile. "And who is that young man?" "I'm Dean, my lady. Or is it goddess?" Dean got an amused look from Meroliah upon his insecurity. The woman only laughed behind her sleeve. "Oh no, my dear boy, humans are so very quick to call us gods when we just like this land as our home. I am Izanami, nothing more." When Azazel was introduced, the demon couple exchanged a look. "You are one of the Watchers, are you not?" Izanagi asked cautiously. "I am," Azazel answered shortly as always. "Eons of prison haven't been kind to you." Izanami took a bowl of rice together with a grilled fish and placed it in front of the angel. The Watchers were created after the rebellion, which made Azazel far younger than Izanami. Consequently, she also treated him like that. "You two have gone native, I see," Meroliah remarked upon the oddly human demons living the ways of the people they had grown fond of. Hearing the couple encourage Azazel to eat more once again, Dean could hear his friends whisper, "Oh, Dean, you barbarian, that's not how you use chopsticks." "I am trying my best here," the Englishman uttered, fighting to transport the food into his mouth without dealing any collateral damage to his surroundings. "Yeah, I can see that." Producing a spoon from one of his pockets, he gave it to Dean. "Here, use that and Just be discreet about it, will you? You embarrass me. What is it exactly that leads you here, Lucifer? Izanagi asked, taking a sip from his green tea. I hoped, Merlai spoke upon clearing his throat, that you might be able to give me some knowledge about the uses of angel blood to Occult with Azazel's knowledge of magic. Their two hosts looked at them with horror written all over their faces. You say someone is sacrificing angels? Izanagi asked, just to be sure he had heard right the first time. Yes, they took Michael. Merlai spoke heavily. That's terrible, Izanami gasped. Surely we fell and we fought, but we still have the same roots. I can only think of transformation, Izanagi spoke thoughtfully. What are you implying? Dean turned to Merlias, who had lost some of his color. They are drinking angel blood. Are you sure? It's what I did to Cain. More or less, he had no body that could be transformed, but it's the divine essence that matters. Dean drowned out the rest of the conversation as his mind granted him unwanted guesses about the detailed usage of angel blood. Even with his mouth empty, he could taste the iron flavor. Having lost the appetite, he excused himself to get some fresh air. The dead seraphim haunted his mind, and then, as his thoughts ran free, he suddenly saw Michael on the stone table in the dark room. Dean had disliked the archangel at first, but he had also seen the will to let go of his arrogance. And he wondered if Merlai's brother was still alive, or if their efforts were in vain. Dean woke up in a dark, damp cell. The last thing he remembered was the cherry tree in the garden. Seeing a window with bars to the hallway outside, he got up to investigate. There was utter darkness out there. Not thinking much about it, he wanted to take the piece of chalk he carried around at all times. Only that it was gone. Had he just been abducted without even noticing?